And so what happens is, we build all these machines to make our lives better, and then they blow up, and you say, oh, the machine is down. And then you go, wait, don't trust machines. And then, it at least makes it a little bit less painful in the moment, because it happens every day. I'm sorry. I mean, I was probably 70% of that, actually, in retrospect.
Today's conversation is with Alex Campbell, the founder of Rose.AI, a cloud data platform designed to help users find, engage, visualize, and share data more effectively. We talk about Alex's time working for Bridgewater, his time at Stanford GSB, where he had a class that made him cry, and the psychology of investing. Being a trader is difficult in volatile conditions, which we're experiencing now, so I felt like this was an especially good conversation. Very timely. Really appreciate what Alex is building. I hope you enjoy today's conversation with Alex Campbell. Dude, thank you so much for doing this conversation with me. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed listening to some of the conversations that you've had already out there on the internet. I'm really interested in learning more about Rose.AI. I'm really curious to learn about your background, your personal journey. Data conversations are some of my favorite topics to explore. Just that process from like data to insight to action that you've put, you've really dedicated your life to. I'm looking forward to this. But I realized about 8 months or so ago that as an investor, as an LP, like just the market, the practice of being an allocator of capital doesn't really lend itself to showing up and applying yourself the way that like being a founder or a GP does. And that really bothered me. Like I didn't like that I was asking people to do things that I knew that my role wasn't positioned to follow suit with. And so I've used the podcast to chronicle some of these conversations, just me satisfying my curiosities. And then when I can connect things across our portfolio, if it's people, if it's data, tools, investment opportunity, that's kind of the notion. So yeah, that's kind of it. And in this conversation, I mean, my goal is to get to know you as a person, to get to understand kind of your arc. Like investing is about lines, not dots. You've shared a little bit about your origin story. I think getting into that, hearing a bit about McGill, fantasy baseball, Bridgewater, Stanford, and the like you'd shared like the experience of a class that was designed to make you cry. I think, and then just diving into like what Rose.AI is, what the kind of principal idea of the business is, and I want to approach this with like a new kind of ground up mindset. So I'm really curious, like what kinds of data sets that you think are interesting, and how managers like myself might be able to use Rose.AI. Does that all that make sense?
Yeah, I think if I get there in one swing, all that debate training would have been worth it. No, I'm kidding. I'm really excited to be on the podcast, and I really, I think it's always great to talk to people who are in investing, and it's always great to talk to people who are in markets. And there's a certain kind of great, amazing, kind of weird person who gets to do both, and it's always great to talk to someone who's in both of those shoes. I think they're two very different worlds that get reconciled in a couple different roles. And it's hard. And I think that that was a huge transition for me, leaving a great institution like, Bridgewater and going out on my own, was this idea of just changing your role and thinking about how do you build an institution as opposed to exist in an institution. So, I'll wind up a little bit and tell a little bit more of the story. But I think that I really like this idea. I like this podcast. I think Lucy was on the other day, who I'm a big fan of. And actually, anyway, we go way back. So, I think that for me, like I got into kind of data mostly through just being a nerd, like being a baseball geek. I went to undergrad up in Canada. They thought I was going to be a long snapper for the football team. I took like one too many hits to the head and just like, I'm not that good at this job. Like, why am I trying to make the football team? Came from a pretty humble background, so didn't have a lot of, cushion. So, single parent household, lost my parents when I was very young. Alcoholism, drugs, depression, all the kind of American stuff, heroin in somewhere in there. All the stuff that's like really now seeing how corrosive it is to kind of what's going on in the U.S. very much viscerally around me. So when I went to, undergrad, it was, tech boom. It was understand what's going on with this tech boom, try to be a computer scientist, and try to understand this kind of machine of capitalism that I was kind of a product of and saw the good things and the bad things of. And that was it. That was the level of thinking I had as like a 20-year-old, right? And so I went to grad school to try to be an economist. And I just was not a very great economist. I was trying to do things on now what you would call kind of machine learning, trying to take psychological frameworks from a guy named Leon Festinger, cognitive dissonance. And this idea of you have two ideas, they're connected in your head. When they disagree, you experience dissonance and what happens. And trying to apply this to like weird things like how people segregate and ideas flow through networks and super abstract stuff that, you know, nobody really cared about, which was good. And so while I was doing this like work that no one cared about, I was furiously playing fantasy baseball against my friends from home, my friends from Boston. And that was my connection while I was very disassociated from, you know, what I was doing because I didn't feel like I was a great economist. I was struggling. I was, you know, against all these mathematicians. I'm not a great mathematician by any stretch. I'm just like a bad mathematician. And, you know, connecting to my friends from Boston by just destroying them playing fantasy baseball. We even like redesigned the league to make it more appropriate to, you know, Nate Silver's Dakota system so that, you know, the guys who walked a lot got a lot of points or whatever. And then, of course, I was accused of rigging the system, which I guess in retrospect I probably was. But, you know, that was kind of how I got into finance because I really loved the world. I was doing this debate thing. I was really interested in like how the system was going. But I was kind of useless as an economist and as an individual. And so, you know, my then partner says, you should do this for a living. You know, you should play spreadsheets for a living. And that's literally, you know, my love affair with finance in one go, which is it's this place where you can have an idea, you can test it by finding out if it's actually true at some level. And then you can go make money in markets by betting on it. And that's a positive feedback loop. And that there aren't that many places to have positive feedback loops in your life. And so I kind of got addicted to markets by just joining Lehman Brothers in 2007. You know, they said, go find a job. So you run around with your little notebook, and I found the meanest guys on the floor, the prop guys, these, you know, French genius engineers. And they would just say, stand there for 6 hours, and I'll ask you to get coffee once every now and again. And then I'll ask you about Nadenberg, chapter 6 or whatever. And you have to have a good answer about Nadenberg. And then they let you book the trades, and then they let you come up with ideas. And then, you know, 3 months later, some guy gets fired, you get his portfolio. 9 months later, you're up $10 million, and the bank is dead. And so I had this really like a rocket ship, weird up and down experience where, you know, from poverty to making more money in a day in a portfolio than my parents had ever made in their life in the span of, you know, 13 months, 12 months, right? This is pre-Volcker. This is you know, don't let people trade. And it wasn't that I was that great. It was partially just I was in a good seat. I was reasonably good at collecting data from different parts of, you know, the universe. And every now and then you would just say, hey, should I go sell volatility on Barclays or whatever? And some trader would be like, mate, you're so, you know, and like, he'd like cuss you out. And you'd be like, I guess I shouldn't do that. And then, you know, you wouldn't lose $1 million. And so it was like, you know, it was kind of funny how it was this idea of information flowing around this organization. And then I saw how that thing collapsed and how quickly it could just disappear and how something worth so much money could be so much pain and all this stuff. And also just the culture of like, well, how did we get to this point? And, you know, how did I wanted to make the system better. And now I'm playing a video game all day, and that makes me feel good, right? And so you had this thing in markets where you have a green day, you feel like king of the world, and you have a red day, and you don't only feel like you're dumb, but you feel like, what am I doing with my life? You know?
I know those feelings really well. I mean, that characterizes up until literally today, the last 14 years of my life. So, what did you do to get out of it? Because I could use some tips. Yeah. How do you think about like learning and progress in such a, in a framework where you're like a goldfish? Like you see the color, the green and the red each day. And that defines how you feel professionally, how you like where your self-worth comes in. And what I've recognized, and we don't need to go down to this rabbit hole too much, but what I've realized is that the people around me, my wife, my kids, my friends, they don't give a shit about that green or red color. And so when I'd go out into the world and carry that baggage with me, they look at me like I was, you know, coming out of like a different planet and like finding a way to get better at my craft while also being a present human being is still something that I'm working on.
Yeah, I don't think we ever get totally, over the good day, bad day thing. I just think when you're not in the markets, it feels like a little bit less random number generator.
Yeah.
And you can shield yourself from it a little more. The markets thing is like negative, 5% day. Like you feel that's a big day, right? Like, or whatever your vol target is or whatever. And like, those experiences, this is the part that actually is, I think, really like, underreported. Like nobody has any empathy for cis finance guys. And I think that's fair to some extent, right? Privileged, get lots of money, get to play this amazing game. But it's a very to just come out of that seat every day and based on something that has nothing to do with your kids, nothing to do with your partner, nothing to do with your friends, you just had the worst day of your life, or you just had the worst day of your year, or whatever. And it is your fault, and it's all connected, but it has nothing to do with them whatsoever. And you're hitting them in up and down, up and down, up and down, or sideways, or I'm confused, or what's going on. And I don't know. I mean, that's honestly, it's not the worst transition to Bridgewater and Ray, because that's kind of how I learned to deal with some of that stuff, right? Which was, I went to business school and had this culture of honesty and transparency and community and care. And then I was fortunate enough to go to Bridgewater and learn about truth and, reconciling different universes, right? So it's all about this dissonance thing. And, Ray's thing of like systemization, I think really is a good way to deal with that.
Could we talk about systemization? Like what is systemization? How does Bridgewater practice it? And like what could I've read Ray Dalio's books, but I can't say that like I'm ready to systemize the things that need it.
I think, look, there's parts I can talk about, parts I can't. I think the parts I can talk about are actually the most helpful, which are just it's kind of like the principles is a good example, which is just write down your rules, write down your thoughts, write down your reasons, and then go back and look at them later and see, do I still agree with them? And so a simple version, which I think most financial institutions do in a good way, is they write down why they make investments. There's a memo, there's a deck, there's a conversation, there's an email, there's a committee, the committee agrees on something. That's documentation, right? So it's not that this is like a whole new idea of documentation, but the idea of documenting your process, documenting your thoughts. And then the second half of that, which is hard to do, and the part that inspired me and connected all these different threads for me, was actually going and building robots and computers to help do that for you. And actually get tools from software, tools from the world, tools from other people. And that's what most people do in finance is they build a machine to run this process, and it goes through people. And so the good thing and the bad thing about systemization is you have your own relationship with, I don't want to get too abstract here, but like how you build these like robots. And like sometimes it involves buying 500 people, sometimes it involves 5 PhDs, sometimes it's like $2 million of software. And everyone has their own relationship to that in terms of how they're evolving, even the smallest family office, right? You got QuickBooks, you got Interactive Brokers or whatever it is, you got Schwab. That's your system, right? And the tax person's going to ask you a question, you're going to go pull it, you're going to represent it. And that's, not to be too rah-rah USA, but that is the great thing about American institutional capitalism, which is it creates that level playing field of, it doesn't matter how big you are, it doesn't matter how small you are, you're all in the same ballpark of how we do this game or whatever.
Yeah, and I think also like the way that the internet lowers the barriers to access for data and data being kind of the input for knowledge and action. You've talked a lot about when you throughout your career the data problem of identifying what are the right data sets, pulling them into your universe in a way that they can be digested, and then having those data sets, really importantly, be something that you can update, that can be like a living, ongoing, iterative process. Like I would love to hear, like maybe it starts when you were back at Lehman Brothers and being told like, no, don't do that, you moron. What were the data sets that were informing your peers to help like navigate these waters? What was your data journey?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because if you're going to try to hold yourself accountable, you got to, I don't know, build your way into something that runs that process as fast as you can and evolves as the world evolves. Yeah, well, it's like, you get into a trade. Let's say you want to buy gold because you're like, the dollar's going up, right, a bunch, or the dollar's going down a bunch, and you want to get out of it or whatever. And you buy a bunch of gold, and then tomorrow happens. Okay, well, the world changed just a little bit. It didn't change a bunch usually. It just changed a little bit. And then another day happens. And then another day happens. And then another day happens. And then it's 15 years later, and you're long a bunch of gold. You have no idea why you bought the gold 15 years ago. And that's systemization. That's data. That's like the whole point of the exercise is to just make sure that your portfolio and what you think and how you're operating are all connected. And oh my God, is that so much work and so much pain? Because just if you have to do it through pulling through 10Ks, if you have to do it through pulling through central bank databases, if you have to do it through forensic accounting, there's all these kinds of ways that people deploy their craft. And then, mathematicians call it alpha, right? I call it pain alpha, which is you get some smart person and you say, go look at this thing and maybe we'll find this stock versus this stock. And oh my God, that's worth $100 million. That's pretty cool. And then you get all these smart, people burned out because they spent all their time finding $100 million like side pockets or whatever. And that's not bad. It's good for the universe, right? But the thing that no one's really counting is just how unbelievably painful that process is. Okay. And so now you have these two processes that are really painful as a person who's investing or managing money. One is the process by which you learn about the world. And the second one is the process by which you manage your portfolio. And then there's a reconciliation of those two things. And oh my God, when you're, had a bad day or whatever, do you not want to go pull like Bloomberg codes and like re-clean them for like the right EBITDA numbers? You just want to like go take a nap so that tomorrow you can think straight. Right. And these two things clash. And so I used to deal with that by just staying up like till all hours of that, whatever, and trying to do my worker time after I do my markets time. And it made me a terrible markets person. Just terrible. Like, my first couple of years of trading, I would be going to bed at like 2 or 3 in the morning on Sunday night and waking up and going to the office at like 7 on the dot.
And what would you mean? What was the work? What was your process outside of market hours? Like, I'd love to understand kind of your, not to keep using the word system, but like, yeah, what was the body of data that you were assembling? Maybe the other way to ask it is like, how did you frame the questions that you needed to answer and the data that you needed to pull and the process that needed to be in place to answer the questions with the data?
Yeah, fair. And I'll try to put it in the context of a real trade because I realize sometimes that can be like kind of abstract wanderer mode. Like, imagine you're trading Deutsche Bank volatility versus Citigroup volatility. And it's 2007. And this is a trade that we did. Okay. And you believe that volatility is mean reverting because mostly it's mean reverting, right? So Citigroup volatility is up a bunch and Deutsche Bank volatility is not up that much. Usually they're the other way around. So Deutsche Bank's more expensive than Citigroup. Okay. Well, great. Time to put on a big pairs trade. So what did you actually just do in that genius pairs trade? You went and bought a bunch of Citigroup stock and you sold a bunch of Deutsche Bank stock, essentially. And when is this? Right before the biggest U.S. financial crisis in 80 years. Okay, so there's a dissonance here. There's a problem. And so, we're doing this trade and we're long Deutsche Bank stock and we're short Citigroup stock, and this is my boss's trade. And I realized that it looks mean reverting because our implied volatility data goes back 3 years. It goes back to 2004. And if instead of HIVG, you put in HVG in Bloomberg and you look at how much stocks are actually volatile, Deutsche Bank and Citigroup are up and down all the time over 10 years. Happens all the time. Why would you bet your career on this? It makes no sense. And so you had this amazing moment, and I knew people who got carried out on this little trade. Their career was irrevocably damaged by this concept of not enough back history. Just not enough understanding about what they didn't understand to know what their risk was. Okay, and so then I go and I'm fortunate enough to go to Bridgewater, and it's back history everywhere, right? And it's, oh my God, go and test all these ideas and learn how much we really just don't know. And so, to connect to your actual question of like, what's my process? I kind of think about it like when I'm at work, that's when I'm finding and cleaning and modeling and getting data into machines and getting those machines into markets. When I'm not on the clock, if my brain is still going, it's just trying to find the next thing that I don't know. So I'm reading books about history. I'm trying to understand, conflict. I kind of got into conflict because it drives energy prices, and energy prices drive inflation, and inflation drives tightening, and tightening drives bonds, and bonds drive, oh my God, I'm raising all this money for a startup, and I'm long bonds. Literally, that was the experience. And so, I think that like I like that process. I'm kind of weird in that way, but I think it's always about trying to understand what you know. And that could be your data, that could be your systems, trying to understand what you don't know, and then having fun kind of playing between those two worlds.
How do you pull significance out of the data that you're assembling? Like I think as an investor, I've lost count of the number of like the data proves that this must be true theses that like it couldn't have been more noise and zero signal. Like, how do you think about signal and noise?
Yeah, great question. So it connects to this concept of don't trust machines, which is a reflection of, you hit a machine in your life, the Bluetooth headphones don't work, and a thing you didn't think about, that you didn't know, means the world is different than you thought, and so the machine is not as reliable as you thought it was. Now just replace machine with correlation or, strategy or whatever it is. And there's all these things that we don't know. And so rather than get upset about it when it happens, just know it's going to happen, right? And sit there and go, hey, the machine's going to break all the time. Don't trust machines. That means that if someone's sitting there telling you the data tells you this must be true, there's red flags going off in the back of your head being like, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. It's a really great data person, a really great investor, a really great, scientist or whatever, connect all these threads, is going to try to tell you what they know and what they don't know, honestly. Because the universe is going to give you enough information over time that if you think you're wrong that many times, we'll see. I mean, I think that's at least what's good about, Nate Silver. He talks this and that about the 538, right? Like, he's publishing his results. At least he's publishing his results, right? And maybe he interprets them differently than you do. I would have some issues with this or that or whatever, but he's doing the thing. You know what I mean? He's writing it out there and saying, here's what I think. And I think that most people don't do that. And so if you start doing that for yourself, and then you just go back and look at your old stuff, you just start to notice, like, okay, I was wrong about this, I was wrong about that, I was overconfident about this, I was overconfident about that. And then that's where, like, again, like, systemization comes in, because you now need to get, like, your arms around all of that uncertainty, right? And that's where you do all different kinds of models and risk and look at drawdowns and say, what could I be wrong about? And then say, oh, cut it in half because I don't believe that thing, right? And make sure there's a human in your machine. That's the only, like, really big picture thing, which is you want to build all these pipes, build this data, but make sure there's a human looking at it and making sure that they think they agree with the machine. If you disagree with what your correlations say, then go fix your correlations, meaning go look at your model and have it actually say what you think, and then align with how you think the world works. I think inflation and bonds is a really easy one for people to think about now, because it just happened. We had a world with no inflation, easing, and it felt amazing. And risk assets are always up when they were down. And is that going to be the same for the next 10 years? Are we going to have higher inflation, higher rates, secularly? How's that going to feel? So that's just one of those unknowns.
When your process is predicated on really driving home the concept that there are so many unknowns out there. From my perspective, like I struggle with that. That starts to feel a little bit suffocating. Like it feels almost nihilistic in the sense that if I start and end every conversation with I don't effing know, what do I do in that scenario? Like, how do I build a portfolio? Like, where are the things that you go long, that you express more risk, whether it be like personal or in your portfolio?
I think the big thing is diversification. Step one, this isn't a new concept. I'm not, touting a thing people haven't heard of. And then, two, after diversification is trying to pull for yourself how much is beta and how much is alpha. How much are you getting just from being in the market or the seat or the role or the asset class, and what you're really long and short about. And then even just that framework right there is like enough to go on, I think, for like most people to get a really good portfolio, actually. And just know, like, hey, if you're betting 90% on your own alpha, like, okay, great. Like, you're gonna have the ups and downs of that, and just know that that's what that looks like. And then, have fun having a bad 18 months. Hope you're not running it at like 70% volatility or whatever, and like, I think that that's lessons that a lot of people who are in crypto, which is skews younger, right? They're learning like out of the cradle. I kind of learned it incidentally through the tech boom, just seeing it go up. I had my Yahoo finance portfolio go down like 89% or whatever. And, it had Amazon in it, so it made it all the way back 25 years later. But, we all learn that in different ways, which is that there's a part of whatever you're investing in, which is beta. It could be tech stocks, it could be crypto, it could be the dollar, it could be gold, it could be real estate, and just being okay with that. And then being like, okay, how much beta do I want? How much alpha do I want? How much like other, either safety, protection, whatever you want to call it, you want.
Can we go back to your career journey? I want to touch on your time at Stanford Business School, and I also want to make sure that we've asked the right questions about your time at Bridgewater. So maybe we'll go back to Lehman Brothers. You get this trading opportunity. You're kicking butt, but the bank fails, and so like the foundation of that opportunity erodes. Did you go from there to graduate school, or was it Bridgewater next?
That was when I went to business school. Yeah. So I literally looked around the world. I went from having like a bunch of people telling me I was going to manage a macro book in 3 months to, beep. But yeah, I was really fortunate enough to get into Stanford. Yeah.
What was the experience at GSB like? What did you want to get out of that when you showed up? What were the people like? And tell me about the class that made you cry.
Thanks. Yeah. I would say, okay, can I do an aphorism on the spot? No. GSB is kind of like the experience I needed, not the experience I wanted, if that makes sense. It was like, I didn't even know what I was getting into. I was kind of trying to wait out the financial crisis. I thought about applying to the CIA or whatever, and it was like, well, what else do you do in the world's biggest, collapse of civilization or whatever? And, it's a place that's a very strong culture, which is what I was really attracted to, coming out of a culture that I didn't necessarily agree with, the kind of markets culture. And so they kind of manifested that kind of in hazing, honestly. Like, I went in like as a person who was very a product of all these like aggressive kind of stereotypical testosterone-filled environments, like debating, football, trading floor, like mathy department or whatever, where the goal was always to win, to be right, to have the right answer, to like, to climb the mountain or whatever, even if it was a stupid mountain or just a bunch of stairs. And I met all these people at Stanford who were way more compelling and interesting and effective and capable than I was. And they weren't like, good at math or whatever. And like, who cares if you're good at math? And my whole frame was wrong. And I just started realizing that like a lot of the experiences I've been having where I had been ineffective in my life were a function of my own ego or my own relationship to how I was interacting with people, and that I was probably giving off bad vibes when I thought other people were mad at me. And like, oh my God. And then that kind of was like a big mind shift. It took me like 6 months of just pure pain. And kind of, I don't know, I think I'm on some of these spectrums, like, like learning about human interactions. And my best friend, said at the time, he's like, this guy, you don't like this guy, whatever. That guy's amazing. Everyone has fun with that guy. You're always telling them why their idea's not going to work. It's like they're different experiences. It's not that like you're providing that, but just the way your mind works or whatever. And so I took a bunch of OB classes. I took, OB meaning organizational behavior, meaning like psychology, kind of like just understanding people. Some of those classes were great, where they taught you, I don't know, how to read. There's one class where they take a stack of cards, and you get, you're a jack, you're a king, you're a 7, you're a 2, and you go around and you know what yours is, and you don't know what yours is, and everybody else knows what yours is, and they interact with you as if you're a king or a 7 or a 6 or a 5. And it was amazing because you would see, first of all, just like that experience is a fun experience. You like learn a bunch of stuff. You see how people have their own dissonance or disagreement with like, they got a 2, but in life they think they're a king, and so they act like a 10, and everybody is like not noticing. It's just amazing. Like you would just see how people like, and then just, things that are fair, things that are not fair, right? People get interacted with because of who they are, how they look, or all this stuff that has nothing to do with their character or whatever. So that was like one big learning. The cry learning was a different one. That was a class called interpersonal dynamics, or colloquially called touchy-feely. And, the joke is that at some point your T group or your group will make you cry. And it doesn't matter if it takes the first session, the like last session, they're coming for you. And, it's true. And it's not because of, malice. It's because it's this experience where you're with the same group of people and you just talk about your experience. You don't go outside of the room really. And you talk about like, well, when you do this, it made me feel this. And when you do this, it made me feel this. And you talk about, I like this person more than you because they are scary or they're nice to me or whatever. And you know, I don't want to spill any state secrets, but you know, there's other stuff that happens in this room that it's all clean, good fun, but it's kind of traumatic in a way because you kind of are like put back into a state of like elementary school or high school where you're very present with like your interactions with other people and their interactions with you, and the fact that we're all just like kind of, you know, grown up monkeys or whatever. And so, you know, I mean, I have a long history of trauma. So at some point, you know, if you put me in a room with 20 people, eventually they'll ask me questions about it. No, that was my experience there. But, you know, the whole experience was one of just kind of, I don't know if you want to call it breaking me, but breaking my mold of like what good was in terms of trying to be a leader, trying to be a professional, trying to, you know, participate in the world. And I think that came a lot from poverty where you're just like always scrapping, nothing ever works. You know, you have to be very kind of like go, 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 go. And that's, you know, if you're trying to talk to the government of XYZ and they manage, you know, 15 trillion, million, billion pounds or whatever, and you're asking them for $200 million, which I've done in my life, you know, they don't want those vibes. They want the other kind of vibes. You know what I mean? They want a suit and they want it to feel comfortable. And that was the learning too, and another learning that I got coming out of Bridgewater, but that's a separate story. Yeah.
How do you? So growing up with such a scarcity first mindset, I think a lot, and I talk a lot about how my favorite businesses all have this one thing in common, where they started from that scarcity efficiency, like solve the problem, but do it in a way that is fundamentally informed by preservation of resources. How do you so that's a superpower that you have. How do you retain that risk awareness and that systems mindset while also presenting and conducting and thinking and operating and maturing up the Maslow's hierarchy in a way that a large pension fund, state fund, whatever, would want to give you $200 million. That kind of cognitive dissonance of who you were and who you are is something that I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I think clients and customers keep you honest, really, is a way of framing it, which is, I have a business, we're scaling that business, and part of that business is about teaching robots how to answer the kinds of questions that I used to get as an investor at a Bridgewater, at a Lehman, at an Oxford, whatever. A hard investment question that involves data. And we're building robots to do that. We're building, they call it AI now, it's faddish or whatever, but we're building software to do this kind of stuff. And there's kind of two philosophies for doing this, in my opinion. One is to sit down and sit at the mountaintop and be like, I understand, and then you do the thing, and then everyone goes, oh, amazing, it's so great, it's so great. And then I have that scarcity mindset where it's just do it. Just try it. Just do it. Just try it. And then think about the mountain and do both. And as always, live in the dissonance. And I was talking about this with my engineers literally yesterday, because we have a model that, I don't want to give me any IP away, really, but, takes a query, tries to understand what your query is asking for, finds a piece of data in our database, and it makes you a chart. Right? It's amazing. It's an amazing thing that it can do. It can finally do it, right? But we're fighting with internally about how smart the model is at this thing and that thing, and is it going to be replaced with this model and that model? And I'm sitting there going, there's going to be 100 of these models, and they're all going to have to talk to each other, and they're going to have to be interoperable, and this and that and this and that. And why am I in this down rabbit hole about building these models? It's the way to get yourself out of that is the conversation after that. Someone's asking me, I need your help building a portfolio. And I'm going in front of someone who's going to give me money, and it's going into this portfolio. I need you to make a chart that has real data in it that we all know, it has to be real. It can't be SBF real. It has to go in front of regulators and compliance and lawyers and all this stuff and be based on real stuff. And say, I'm going to put your money in this, stock, in this commodity, in this currency, in this bond. And we also do that. And that's, I think, my secret versus other people, versus the Y Combinator kids who are probably smarter than me at computer science at this point, because they just came out of Stanford or Berkeley or whatever, but haven't had 20 years of pain getting data from this vendor, getting it out of this system, making the chart this way and that way. And so I just constantly take my team and I almost like dog food it a little bit, where I think there's a version of this business which has more capital, maybe grows faster by some measures, but is a worse product than the one that we're building, because the one that we're building is built for actual people to use to solve actual questions that are really painful to answer, that are easy to think about answering in like just a pure visualization environment, like a Looker or Tableau. I love those apps. I literally work on installing them on our clients all the time. So I'm not going to talk trash about them, but getting data out of them is like as hard as it is getting data into them, right? Well, if you're building an investment system or you want to update that thing or you want to understand how it was constructed, now you need a whole engineering team, not only to get data in, to get data out of that thing. Oh my God, that's just so much pain. And the market's just moved. Yeah. And your LPs want a different portfolio and this and that. So, we say this is kind of a weird juxtaposition. And I think it's for some people and some people it's definitely not. Okay. But we say, build the robot as best as you can and use it, and just try to use it with real customers, real clients. And that might mean that we do more services than people like in a pure venture model, I think, to some degree. But it also means that our robots get smarter way faster. And that's really kind of what I'm trying to do.
Can you take me back to kind of tell the story, the founding story of Rose.AI? Obviously, like the identification of a problem, no question. What was the solution that you felt like you had from that kind of initial kernel? And if you could just kind of walk me through the storytelling of Rose.AI, and then maybe we can talk about some use cases.
Yeah, I think the story came just from the pain of, you're a scrappy kid from the projects or whatever, and you got a big meeting with a Greg Jensen or Ray Dalio, effectively the most important, richest people in the world, to your career, to your life, to the universe or whatever, in like 3 hours, and the computers aren't working. I mean, it's just that pain, right? Or the data's not calculated, or the chart's not made, or the whatever. And sitting there and being like, this thing really sucks, and then trying to think about how most good businesses are built out of pain. And so when I left, I didn't really have an exact clear idea of what it was. It was more, I want to build, I saw the house, I saw the watch from her. Do you remember that? And, I'd done some of this stuff back in grad school, but I wasn't like great at it. There was a guy from Oxford who was still involved in the project, but was going to like co-found it with me. And he was like really good at AI. And I was like, we're going to solve this problem. We're just going to go and solve this problem. And then he got, family stuff and couldn't join the project after I had already kind of YOLO'd out from the biggest hedge fund in the world. And so that was like founder lesson 1 or whatever, was like, I don't know, founder team fit or whatever. And I moved and all this stuff. And so, that was, but the goal was always to try to make it not feel like SaaS. And I know this is like investors hate this, but in the end, I hope I will be redeemed, which is like, SaaS is a model, a Tableau Looker is a model where if I want you to see my chart, I have to pay the company for you to see the chart. If I want you to get the data out of that chart, now you got to pay more. Okay. And if you've ever lived in a JP Morgan or a Goldman Sachs or an AQR or a Point72 or a Viking or any of these, big places, you know how painful it is to get anything on your computer changed whatsoever. Talk about like once a quarter, some guy comes in with like a stethoscope and there's a security team and like, SWAT is there or whatever. I'm kidding a little bit, but it's a big pain in the butt. And now you're saying you want to build tools for everyone in finance to be able to see, share, and exchange data, and actually one day buy and sell it legally, okay? And you're going to put $25 a seat in front of everybody. $25 a seat. Here's another form. Here's another form. Here's another form. I said, I don't want to do that. I never wanted the experience to be, I forgot my password. I can't get in. Oh my God. Because empathy for the guy who just had a down 5% day and he doesn't care about his password or whatever it is. He doesn't have the capacity to do that because a million things are hitting him at once or her at once. And they just, the way your brain works when you're managing money is you have that one obligation and everything else is secondary. And so if someone's like, oh, you didn't install the right Python package, it's like, get out of here, man. Like, that's not the right answer. And so I was like, we can solve that problem. We can solve that problem. And then partially because the guy who I tried to start it with, kind of needed a sabbatical, I started a hedge fund. I started a hedge fund to hedge this company, which makes no sense. Everybody hates it, but to hedge the fact that I'm trying to build this robot. It's going to take me 10 years. And the biggest risk in the world I see is China blowing up. Okay, I need to hedge that risk. And if it doesn't work, if this hedge fund doesn't work, which it probably won't, because no one wants to short China right now, at least I'll build a good product, because I'm going to use this product. And every day I'm going to use it to manage my data and get my systems. And it doesn't matter if there's no assets or it's tiny or we're losing money. It's going to teach this robot. It's going to teach this product. So that's how Rose got built. And then we needed to pay for engineers. And so I was like, well, let's go get clients. Go find people who have data problems and then use Rose to solve their data problem. So that's kind of the story. It's like, some people
tell me about your first client. How did you identify that client? What was their story, and how did you bring a solution to them?
Well, I can't talk too much because the first client I worked with.
Skip the specifics, but more just the process of I'm using this, like I'm dog fooding this system to help run a micro hedge fund, but this system is something that can apply benefit to a larger organization, like just that discovery process and like figuring, like reaching into what it was that they had as a problem and figuring out how your system could solve it, and then growing the use cases is something I'm very interested in.
So I was fortunate enough to be kind of an EIR at Thrive, kind of like one of their first data research.
Okay. So that an EIR is an entrepreneur in residence, right?
Sorry, an entrepreneur in residence. Yeah. But we didn't even have really a name for it. It was kind of just like Campbell's going to show up. I knew the guys who were running it, and they were super open-minded about, hey, let's think about how to systemize what we do. And so, the first step in a lot of cases was just going and talking to portfolio companies about how they were working with data, how they're using data, trying to understand how a venture fund even talks to its portfolio companies with regards to data, and just understand that problem. And so, you start to see the same patterns of information, and the same patterns are just data is really hard to find. It gets put into these different tools. These different tools don't talk to each other that well. You have to hire specialists to go and interact with these tools, and that means that the loop between asking a question and getting an answer becomes something that takes weeks or months, as opposed to otherwise. And then connecting that to actually the hedge fund, what we found was that there's a lot of talk about systemization, a lot of talk about automation, but the quant funds are actually some of the biggest funds in the world. And they have the most people at them. And so there's this weird inversion of the relationship between money and people kind of in quant finance or systematic finance or whatever you have it, which is that it seems way less efficient than, 2 or 3 people running $20, $30 billion of equities or whatever in their backyard. And so that's just the depth of the problem and the degree to which people are currently solving this problem with humans that are very expensive. Just, people like me, people like you, people who are really smart, who are really into some version of the world, who are really expensive and who are really in pain, who burn out really fast. And so you go, wait a sec, these things are all connected. Maybe if we just let people buy and sell the outputs of what they're doing, one, people would feel more validated because they'd go, well, I lost money this year, but people bought my systems. It's a little tricky, but it's not that crazy. 2, you'd have more stable income for everybody, right? 3, you'd realize, wait a second, does it make sense that AQR and JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs have 100 people doing the exact same job? It makes no sense. And they should just pay 1/10 of that to the other person who gets credit for doing a good job, right? And they can be like Airbnb. They can build a relationship. Oh, JP Morgan has really good bonds data. Let's use their bond data. And that's already happening, to be clear, in prime brokerage rooms and back at, advisors. Oh, these guys have good volatility data. These guys are good at prime brokerage. These guys understand this capital pool. And why not just kind of make that a little more transparent? And then, Bridgewater was just a way of saying, wait a sec, this is valuable.
Yes.
Right? That the process is valuable, that it actually matters, and then seeing how it worked as a participant in it. And there not being like a magic sauce, just being a lot of really smart people working really hard, like that. And so it's valuable, it's painful, and there's a better way of doing it for sure. That was the 3 things.
And so you are principally like a marketplace for the purchase and sale of data. And so I'd love to hear two kind of areas of conversation. One is, how do you aggregate both the supply, meaning the people that are pulling data sets together and presenting them in a consumable format? How do you find the demand? How do you get that critical mass? And then also, what do you with Rose.AI intend to build that facilitates that exchange? I mean, are you building low level models? What of that work do you need to do to make this like a system that people can come and engage with? I'm just really curious, like how you view that line between what you want for your customers, the supply and the demand to be building, versus what it is that you guys have to do for them.
So I think it's a great question that kind of starts with how data is broken now. And so we all know this, we just don't think about it because it's painful. But imagine you're managing, X billion dollars, and to buy like a $2,000 time series takes you like 6 or 9 months of paperwork, of back and forth, of this or that. And that's just one tiny example. Everybody has an example where there's stock that you want to know something about. There's a country that you're looking at, you want to know what's going on with the local banks or whatever. And that process just taking so much longer than the process to actually make decisions in markets, which is, I think, scary and bad. It's some like really fundamental way where, okay, I can trade every 15 seconds, but I update my understanding of the world every month.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it's like what we're seeing with the Fed when we're asking like, hey, like this data that you guys made a real-time decision on, that it's 6 months old, right? And that's a little scary.
Exactly. And so you're sitting there and you see what's broken, and then you go and look at it and you go, well, part of the reason it's broken is because of intellectual property, which deserves to be protected, which is vendors are trying to sell data, and they have to, find someone who's willing to pay enough for it to be worth their time to find that person. It's a classic search problem. And they're just bad at it. And they're partially bad at it because it's too expensive. They're partially bad at it because it's a really patchwork market. And they're partially bad at it because they create all this process to justify their own existence, no offense, because when you sell a $75,000 ticket item, you can afford to spend, $30,000 of sales and marketing and all that stuff to try to get the person in the door or whatever. And that is in not really even in their interests is one of the insights here. It's that what we can do is we can take the quantity of data and make it go up by like 1,000,000 times, 10,000 times really fast, and make the price go down by 10x and radically democratize what's in all these different financial institution databases. And the good guys, the good gals who are good at this will still win because they're going to be able to participate both as a creator of content where they keep all the best stuff and they trade on it and they make tons of money and they grow exponentially because it's an increasing returns to scale game. And they sell the parts that other people can use that helps them with their life that isn't going to change the universe. And I mean basic stuff like the difference between the return you get from holding a stock with dividends and without dividends. With carry or without carry. How about taxes? All the things that's just one stock that goes into one investment that you really actually have to do at the end of the day, where it's pain to go and make in a spreadsheet, in a file, in a Jupyter notebook, in a whatever you want to call it. And so we're going to try to find the people who are good at that and connect them to the people who need that information. And at the beginning, it's a marketplace problem because you have high willingness to pay, high value, but very few participants, right? And so this is kind of where the become annoying on Twitter strategy like came up, because it was like, well, how do we find these people? Well, I know a lot of them, but I don't know all of them, right? And the way that people try to consume this content is visual. And that's what Rose does amazingly, which is it provides a visual answer to a common finance question.
Did you guys build your own BI layer, or did you guys use one of the tools that you mentioned?
No, so we took something from the open source and it's integrated into the product. And of course, I always want to make it better. So in 5 years, we're going to do VR.
What is it, Grafana, or what is it that you guys are built on?
Oh, I'll tell you later.
Okay, all right, that's fine. I'm open source software communities are one of my side hobbies.
But it takes a lot of work. So it's the classic open source thing where it's not really anything, even something you pay for. It's any of these integrations is hugely painful. We're trying not to be the visualization layer. We're doing some things around you can talk to the robot and it'll change the color of the chart and it'll manipulate the chart. So that's cool stuff, but it's not production. It's not there yet. But eventually we just want to be able, conceptually, I kind of speak into abstract terms, for your dentist secretary to be able to use this product.
So let's get into some of those use cases. Let's actually first talk on the supply side, if you don't mind. So if someone's listening to this and they think I know data, I can find great sources. Let me add it, Alex. I want to start contributing data sets here. How would they do that?
So the big thing you have to consider, and I should have said this earlier, is do you own all the data or are you licensing the data? And we deal with both, okay? But let's make a distinction. So in some cases, you go and you find data on the internet and you pipe it to someone else. And that's a legit form of all of your intellectual property because of the rights. Sometimes you generate the data and you have all the rights. This is an emerging IP field. There's all kinds of nobody knows what's going to happen. You see the AI community talking about this now. There's other kinds of data where they're derived from multiple different vendors or one vendor. You take some Bloomberg data, you take some Reuters data, you take some S&P, Cap IQ, FactSet, and you clean it, which is this process. And you get a chart at the end of it that goes into a PowerPoint or a pitch deck or an email that goes to someone else. And for a financial person, that's like a commitment. It's an obligation. It's like, I made this thing. I think it's true. Okay. So what we've done is we've created technology to protect the intellectual property of the original vendor of that information. So you are not allowed to buy non-legal data on Rose. You can only buy legal data. But what we do is we say, hey, there are lots of cases where you want something, and this is where it's manual, and we do things that don't scale, and eventually we'll productionalize this. We say, hey, you really want this data about the balance of payments in these emerging markets. We know a vendor who does a great job of that. And we've already cleaned up that data, or somebody else has already cleaned up that data, and you can just buy it with a click of a button. Sometimes it's a conversation. When it's a conversation because the ultimate vendor demands it be a conversation. It's not our choice. Over time, we just want to make them so happy, the quantities going up, the prices going down, that they let us turn that into like a Stripe or like a Plaid or something where they allow us to connect to their systems and help people buy their data in the way that we know that they will when they're not selling it in $75,000 pieces. They're selling it at $100 here, $75 here. There's an analyst who's up at 3 a.m. who, with a credit card, will buy that thing, right? And they just need to be liberated to do it. And they don't even need their sysadmin to do that. They can do it on our website. It's like download, click into CSV kind of thing. And that's how we're going to scale the business over time. Just providing people answers to the things that they really care about at like 2 a.m.
And so I'd love to maybe then also talk like on that, hopefully I'm not awake at 3 a.m. looking for data, but like it's not out of the realm of possibility. If I were, in my case, I think I shared with you, like I think cloud infrastructure stocks are really inexpensive right now. They've just been crushed, and I love the long-term secular outlook for software continuing to eat the world. There are a lot of unknowns that I want to more fully consider. Like, how would I use Rose.AI for this project that I'm thinking about?
So we usually start with internal data, external data as a framework, which is, what do you know already? What do you have already? So we can go down that rabbit hole, but,
So let's say that I'm, subscribed to some financial aggregator. I'm using Cap IQ, or I'm using, I use Canalist. So I have all the financial data, but I'm looking at more either real-time data or things that are orthogonal to the primary financials that I'm working with, hiring boards, other. I guess part of this is like what data sets how are you helping people explore those unknown unknowns with the query process?
I think that's a great representation of kind of how most equity investors approach data, which is you have your fundamentals data, you have it from a source, one or two sources, usually it's just one. So you have multiples, you're already like in the 75th percentile, right? And you probably use some combination of spreadsheets and Jupyter notebooks to clean and understand that data, and that's your truth. Okay, so that's the internal data. So now that we have that internal data, we'd say, well, first of all, there's ways, and I don't want to make this too complicated, we're going to make this super easy, but ways you can compare your truth to what FactSet says, right? To what Bloomberg says, to what some analyst says about actually EBITDA divided by EV, actually free cash flow, actually, price to earnings. There's 16 different ways of analyzing price to earnings. And as an investor, you can handle those 16 different versions in your head. You just don't want to make all 16 different versions. Trailing 12 months, trailing forward 15 months, estimates forward, blah, 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 all these different representations. That's just your internal data truth. So we can help augment that, understand that by, again, adding more potentially dissonant time series representations and figuring out truth, helping you figure out actually what exists. Because maybe you're in it because you like you like something that's down 70% and has good cash flows or whatever. And so you can find that in your existing data. Now, the second thing you talked about, which is go find external data. This is the fun part, right? This is the alpha. And so you can go, the whole universe is available to you, right? But you can go and find GitHub repos. You can go and find employee records. You can go and find like how many employees they have. You can find their ratings on their apps. You can in Rose right now, you can use Google Trends to test any combination of Google Trends and see how it compares over time. And that's like automated right in the front end of the system. And it can be a little bit confusing about what's supported and what's not because we're just trying to integrate with everything. And so what that means is that we have vendors who we've already connected to, who we have an agreement, one, to connect to their data, and two, how we clean their data and prevent it to people. Meaning things like we call every country in the world a 3-letter country code. So it's USA, CHN, JPN, EUR, DEU, and there's from like an ISO from some international standards board. And this is so weedy and detailed, but it means that every time we get a new vendor, we map it to that representation. And now you know what we know about all those people. So if you want to connect your Cap IQ to your FactSet to your Bloomberg, it's easy to do. So in terms of external data, we have vendors who sell some of this alternative data already on the platform, and we also help people when they have ideas. So they maybe need a scraper, and they actually want to hire someone to go and like build the scraper and dump it into a Excel file once a week. Like this is a version of that problem that I described, which in a normal tech company they wouldn't do because they'd be too proud to do it. They'd be like, oh, we don't do this kind of services job. And I go, no, the fact that this person is hiring someone means find data, grab it, visualize it, share it. Anything in that process until this company is, $1 trillion, we're going to do it.
Yeah. No, I think that's smart. And I think especially right now, like, meaning where capital has become a lot more scarce, building a business requires near-term revenue. And I think what also I think is really important, the willingness to pay. Like, discover where there is a willingness to pay and then build a business model around that. Don't start with, oh, I want this thing that scales and has all of like these platform, financial characteristics. Like it's looking through the telescope the wrong way. And so, how are you building the go-to-market here? Like how, if I'm a startup fund manager, or if I'm AQR, like wildly different businesses, access to resource, purchasing habits, like what is the go-to-market here?
Yeah, so financial services are weird, and especially investment management is a weird, part of our core starting market to start in. Because the smallest funds have some of the same obligations as the biggest funds. The smallest financial institutions that are actually regulated have to abide by all the same compliance, regulatory, and operational and tech restraints that the big guys do. And so that is a go-to-market problem when you're building a demand-supply marketplace, right? And so what we find is that what people really need is an answer to their question first. They don't just need a visualization app. They don't just need a system. They don't just need this. They need an understanding of A, the answer to their question, and B, how can I do this next time more by myself? Right? And that's my explicit goal. It's not to stick around and sell a $20 million project. It's to say, how can we get this organization from here to wherever they want to go, here to here, here to here? And that sometimes requires hiring. It requires training. In some contexts, we've had, $1 million plus deals where we literally hire them data teams and train them and teach them how to do all this stuff. And it's really just, you have to be kind of fanatically devoted to this craft and think there's a real business here because, you find yourself in these meetings and you're like interviewing some like third level, right out of undergrad data analyst for like a 50-person team. And you're like, no, this really matters. Like you got it, how you build it matters. And so, our goal is to understand how people question their world with data and how to give them those answers. and then go and do it, and then say, hey, our product does it too. And over time, the product you can think of as like this like dumb AI, dumb interface, which is slowly getting better and allows us to sell and do way more and more and more business. And you can start to see it playing out just day to day, but it's like the things that it can do now versus the things it could do 2 years ago. It starts to connect to investors and to customers and to clients in a way that 3-4 years ago, it was too hard to bridge that gap for investors. Like, ChatGPT has helped us a lot because it shows the direction that everything's heading.
Yeah, I always think about the line from guy from Adobe, Scott Belsky, talks about how people are lazy, selfish, and vain. And with that reality, like coming into the business that you're trying to solve, I spent a very short period of time on Rose.AI, and I'm very interested in learning more and seeing how I can use it. But I realized that this is something that you have to be committed to. This is something that it doesn't have the it doesn't jump out of the box in a single click. What is that line between customized, powerful, and easy to use?
Yeah, I think that's great feedback. And to be clear, that's part of the reason we still have services in the mix, because it's really still a tool for the creator of the chart and then the person who's consuming that chart. The next iteration of the product, the one that I'm working on, with the team in this office kind of thing, does remove the requirement to really not just speak plain English. So you're going to be able to say to Rose, hey, can you show me the drawdown in all these tech stocks? Can you show me the correlation between, wheat and corn? Can you show me the GDP report? Can you show me how the GDP report was built? And some of these questions are really hard and some of them are easy, but it's going to paint the picture.
Are you able to, as you ingest data, are you able to run correlation analysis that can identify data sets? So if I go in and I type the asset that I'm interested in, would you be able to surface, you might not have thought of these data sets, or like you talked about GitHub repos. Like if I'm thinking about this for an hour, I definitely come up with that. But if I'm thinking about it for 5 minutes, I don't. If I'm suggested GitHub repos and X, Y's, and Z's up front, I then can iterate much more quickly and build that data set. Like there's something about making that suggestion that I think would be really powerful. I'm curious, like how you think about doing the analysis on these data sets and then being proactive in surfacing in areas that people might not be thinking of.
Yeah, I think that that's great feedback. And part of the goal of the product, and it's not quite there yet, is to create not a social experience, but something that enables your social experience.
I just have to say, so are you familiar with the company Domo? They're a business intelligence platform. So earlier on the podcast, I had Bruce Felt on, the CFO, who actually is retiring now. So congratulations to Bruce. Like he's one of my favorite people out there. One of the coolest experiences that I had was at and it wasn't investing in Domo because that stock has been a really challenging story, but their customer experiences are always something that just really hit me. Sitting at lunch and hearing people ask, how do you facilitate, so these are customers at their user event, people saying, how do you facilitate data curiosity in your organization? Which I love that as a concept, because what that is really saying is, how do you get your peers to want to make more fact-based decisions, and then having that be like the culture that grows in the organization?
I think that the data curiosity comes from seeing the impact of a really great chart in an organization and seeing how the chart changes behaviors and decisions and the person who made the chart's life in a way. Like, I think finance runs on visualizing information and convincing people to do things that are in their interests and in your interests based on the quality of that information. And so the hope is to make, tools that enable people to help their organizations, help themselves, help, the universe at some level, by finding truth and kind of showing it to people in a way where they go, oh, that's interesting. How did you make that? Or I'd like that information, or it's helpful to me. And that's really the meta bet of the company, which is that you can create a positive flywheel between people who produce charts and people who want to consume the data behind those charts.
Yeah.
And if you just do a great job of that, people will come.
How have you raised money for this business, and what's the current environment been like for you?
Yeah, so we did a seed round about 18 months ago from a handful of really great investors from like the world of finance, mostly New York, some Canada, Portage, Box Group, some, I don't want to say too many names of individuals, but some, really both from old financial institutions and otherwise, who understand kind of the depth of the pain and the size of the market that we're working in. I think we, in a way that I hope maybe that, Sam Altman helps a little bit with his stuff, have had a hard time communicating with kind of what I would call classic San Francisco venture investors, because they really want to see Y Combinator, you release a widget, it's got 40% month-over-month growth with an 80% retention, and everyone's paying $5. And we're kind of playing this like reverse elephant hunting game, which I agree is not the best way to do the business if we weren't doing the services. Meaning we have pitched Goldman Sachs, we have pitched AQR, and we get feedback, real feedback on, hey, this is better than what we have, but we can't do it for this reason or that reason. But that's, to me, makes me a little bit more hungry, because I see other people trying to do it. I see Snowflake. I see all these people trying to do selling data and doing it badly, doing it the wrong way for financial services. What
is Snowflake or another data exchange missing when it comes to financial services?
There's two big things that it misses, and maybe they'll gang up on me after I say this and I'll get out. But
Frank Slootman, don't come get Alex.
One is that they really just don't play nice with spreadsheets, which is such a stupid, simple thing. But I'm on my hobby horse here. Like, Apple II was a spreadsheet machine before it was anything else. Like, Steve Jobs is running around there selling people spreadsheets and getting rich, and Lamborghini is off of VisiCalc, on the Apple II or whatever. And somehow 50 years later, it's now so chic to just dump on spreadsheet people that we have clients where there's like a culture war. It's like the Butler and Jihad in the company or whatever, between the spreadsheet people and the code people.
Yeah.
So a lot of the cloud repositories just don't play nice with spreadsheets. And so that's a big deal, because it means that the users feel like they're attacked. The second thing, and I'll round up here, is they don't allow you to sell the outputs of the process. So we talked about the person up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. making the chart. But Snowflake is all inputs. It's these gigantic, repositories of basically SQL data that you can play with if you know SQL. We just talked about how everyone who's in finance is in spreadsheets. And so there's this big tension there with how you can actually provide people who think a different way than you value. And so that's where we think we win, by answering real questions. Because my team will do that, I do that, and then our customers start to do it in our environment, and they're answering real hard finance questions, not just like big data exercises that go into a Looker dashboard every now and then.
I absolutely feel, hear, understand, live the problem, the dislocation that you're talking about. Alex, I've really enjoyed getting to know you. I'm really looking forward to being a customer of Rose.AI. I think, and when businesses like what you're building solve the problems that I care so much about, Tegas is a great example. My former fund was one of Tegas's very first clients, and I have sold the shit out of that product because it's really made my life better. Rose.AI in its best version of itself makes my life so much better, and I think the world is getting very meta about this. All human suffering is the result of lack of knowledge. You're hacking away at that, and I think that's just the coolest.
I'm trying. Thank you.
I've really enjoyed getting to meet you. My closing question that I ask everybody is, tell me about a song. I don't know what role music has played in your life. Given your life journey, I'm certain that there has been a moment where a song has reached into your soul and just zapped. So I don't know. What's a song that really means something to you?
So I was unprepared for this, but because I didn't want to think about it yesterday. It's such a striking question. But now you're asking again, I have an answer. So This Time Tomorrow by the Kinks. The song when, what's his name? Adrian Brody is running in the Wes Anderson movie trying to catch the train, and he has this suitcase, and he throws the suitcase on the back of the train, and the suitcase falls off, and he says, screw it, he gets on the train or whatever. And, I play that sometimes when I'm leaving a hotel or leaving somewhere or getting to my, next place. I'm kind of a nomad, mildly itinerant. And so, there's a romanticism about that. There's also a pain about that. And I think that that's a good song that represents it.
The notion of being itinerant and that being cool and liberating being loose-footed, but also it drains on you and it can feel lonely. Like that's personally how I feel right now. We've been, ever since COVID for the last 3 years, we've been moving a lot, and I'm pretty eager to just, set my feet in one place for a bit. So I'll enjoy checking out that song. And I'm trying to remember what the Wes Anderson film is. I was hoping that I could pull the title out of the back of my pocket. But
Darjeeling Limited.
Darjeeling Limited. Thank you for.
It's the one where they go to India, and
yes.
it's like this the scene in the beginning. And I think you think the movie's going to be about Bill Murray because he's in the beginning.
Yes.
And then he's not in the movie at all. And it's just a great 1-2 punch by Wes Anderson. Anyway.
Alex, thank you so much for this conversation. I look forward to talking to you more. I look forward to hopefully meeting in person. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great holiday season, man.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care.
Bye. Later.
Bye. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening. This has been an Unlimited Partners production. The show is edited and produced by Andrew Thomas, and our music was composed by Nick Samaska. If you enjoy listening to Unlimited Partners, would you consider sharing this with someone in your network or writing a review on whatever podcast player that you use? We'd really appreciate it. If you'd like to learn more about sponsoring Unlimited Partners, then please say hi. Email us at sponsor@up-pod.com.